This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of bringing Wade Norris by way of Williamsburg, by way of Hockey Beard, by way of SnapCalorie. We're going to talk about changing the way you look at your food, what technology can show you, and how awesome our business developments are collectively. So, Wade, welcome to your first Halo Talks.
Yeah, Pete, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on and really appreciate it.
Awesome. So talk about your background, because you have a unique background that most ventures that hit the Halo sector do not have the type of team and brand equity, if you will, of some of the largest technology companies in the world that have brought you here. So give us you and your team's background and why you've decided to dedicate your life to snapping calories.
Yeah, so my background is that I was a researcher at Google AI for quite some time, so kind of lucked out timing-wise and just transitioned into the AI space a little bit before computer vision started blowing up. And personally, I was in the computer vision space, so trying to help computers understand photos and videos in the world around us. And what had an incredible ride was, I think, on a team of about 10 people initially in Google AI, and we went out to about like 140 researchers by the time I left. So it got to see a bunch of really cool products get built. And at some point I got the opportunity to just kind of work on something new and start a new team. And I kind of had a little bit of a existential moment of wondering what I wanted to work on, and tried to think about if I'm going to spend the next 5 years of my life on something, I really want it to be something that has an impact, something that's really meaningful and helps people. And so, in typical nerdy Google engineer fashion, I made a spreadsheet. I Google searched top 10 causes of death in the United States. And I started trying to just see where was the opportunity for me to have the biggest impact. And I just started reading. I mean, obviously, I didn't think I was going to solve one of those per se, but it just couldn't have been more apparent right out of the gates as you're reading about, the state of the United States and the causes of death that we have. Diet and nutrition was just, I didn't even really need to finish the spreadsheet. It was just so apparent that diet and nutrition was the spot.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, it's awesome that, you work at a company like, a Google, a Microsoft, let's just say, a Facebook, and they say, just come up with the biggest ideas. Let's not, look at niche opportunities. Let's look at game-changing opportunities, and let's just go at it as if there's a pathway to solve it, and then we'll figure out, what we got to break along the way, to get there. When you take a look and you say, hey, I probably could have gotten the resources to do this inside of Google if you really wanted to. Or you say, you know what, it's time for me to kind of break off. Talk first as an entrepreneur of saying, I've got a safe job. AI is the future. I could do this inside one of the largest companies. Yeah, my dad and I are shareholder. Probably own a couple bricks. Nothing material, but the talent pool obviously is top notch. So what kind of gives you the bravado to, say, hey, I can actually do this and it might even be better outside?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say one is better than the other, or there's just a trade-off, right? And so when you're in a small ship, you can turn quick, right? And so I'd say the big thing is at Google, I mean, I feel incredibly lucky that they let me just kind of pick an idea and take a stab at it. That's incredibly fortuitous to be able to do that. And so it was an incredible opportunity to build a team of researchers and start researching this space. At some point, Google didn't really have a product to put it in. And so it was a public health effort, right? And so they open sourced a lot of that. That's something they can do that, other people can't. So that's a huge advantage. They can take a stab at really helping people with no real spot for it to live within the company. And that's an incredible thing. For me, after I had left, when they decided to open source a lot of the work I had done, I just thought that being at a startup was the spot to be, because you didn't have to deal with finding the right product for something to live in. If you're at a small ship, you can kind of be nimble and you can make decisions quick. You don't need to get things perfectly right, And so if you launch a product that isn't perfect, that's okay when you're at a startup. And that's a lot riskier when you're at a company like Google with a lot of brand value. And so personally, where I was at later in my career was that I wanted to take bigger risks, and I wanted to be able to, throw something out there that didn't necessarily work perfectly the first time. And that's just kind of, it's trade-offs. Both have their advantages and disadvantages.
So a lot of people that start companies, and I've been I've done this, and it hasn't worked out. Where I started a software company back in 2000 to 2003, but the pipes just weren't there to actually deliver it. There was no Wi-Fi, there was no mobile, there was a little bit of broadband. People were just getting onto DSL, so like it just wasn't really the right time or the infrastructure or distribution of data to actually make this startup work. Fast forward to where you are today and say, okay, look, the technology on the phone, the LiDAR, some of the things that you need in order to be successful are either, widespread, starting to be used. So talk about you as an entrepreneur to have a lens into, look, I know that the pieces of the puzzle for me are actually there, that I'm not waiting on the next technology to allow the commercialization of it. Because I think people sometimes forget about that when they're starting up a new company. So talk about how your brain works based on your experience in that front.
Yeah, you're so right. And I'm glad you bring up the LiDAR. It's an incredible piece of technology. And I don't think most people realize that they're carrying this around in their pocket. But I mean, for people that don't understand that, the LiDAR is basically the same sensor that was developed for the self-driving car. It does basically sends out lasers and it understands the exact dimensions of everything in the room. So typically people use this for things like the IKEA app and putting furniture in the room and making sure it fits, or using the measuring tape to measure things. In the case of the food space, when we were doing research on this, we realized that what people are quite bad at, it turns out, is portion size estimation. So really, a lot of people worry about the oils and this and that. But at the end of the day, if you measure how far off people are from traditional methods of walking, they get 53% error, 53% mean caloric error from visual portion size estimation alone. So if they're using a scale, that's not the case, right? But if they're out at dinner and they're not using a scale, they're just way off on portion size estimation. And so in terms of this like revolution we have going on right now is that people are getting this LiDAR put into their phone. And most people don't realize they're carrying around this incredible piece of technology that can measure the exact volume of everything in the room in front of them in a snap. And so that's really one of the most critical pieces that we are leveraging in our app. And it's on the iPhone Pros. So if somebody has an iPhone Pro, they can use our app. They don't need to think about putting stuff on a scale. We just know the volume of everything on the plate.
Talk about the level of detail that you've gotten to go down to. Let's say, my mom used to make like a mean lasagna. It also kind of looked like a 7-layer cake. So how does the technology and the AI, know what that is, diagnose it, figure out the calorie count? Talk us through how the system works.
Right. So there's two components. There's the portion size estimation, and then there's the question of what kind of food am I eating. So we're kind of on two waves, as you bring up. There's the AI space that's developed like crazy. And so we use deep nets and AI to basically understand the types of food in the scene. And we can see the breakdown of, is there cheese in that lasagna? Is there meat in that lasagna? Anything that a nutritionist could see, the AI network can see that breakdown and try to make an educated guess. And then when it comes to the portion size, that's done with the LiDAR. So we measure the volume of the things on the plate. And we basically break that down into two challenges. And we have these two incredible pieces of technology that both just came out that basically solve that for you. So you can think of it basically as the same as sending a photo to a nutritionist, having them write up everything, write out all the ingredients and whatnot, and how much they think there is. The only difference is that we're actually about twice as accurate as a nutritionist when it comes to portion size estimation.
So a lot of restaurants around the country have been mandated to put the calorie count on their menus. I remember I used to go to, trying to remember the name of the place that had like the Fuddruckers maybe or something where there's one of them, like an Olive Garden meets a Fuddruckers meets a Fridays or something. Yeah. And, once they put down what the dip was, it was like 1,600 calories for like the
sometimes you just don't want to know,
Sometimes you want to just have them take it off the menu after they did the calculation, say this is probably not good for people. Yet somehow it stays on the menu and it has like a most popular like star next to it. How much are those off in general versus like when you actually take the picture of it? Let's start there for question number one.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So legally, nutrition labels in general are allowed to be 20% air, so plus or minus 20% mean caloric air. That's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a surprising amount. I think a lot of people don't realize that when they see those labels, they're actually allowed to be quite off. And then there's a question of how much are they actually off, right? Because they're legally allowed to be 20%. And so there's actually a really interesting Casey Neistat episode on this where he runs around New York and he has a lab test everything. Some of them, I think, were about 2x the calories that were listed on the package. So it really depends. I mean, it's hard to say because nobody's really out there policing this that aggressively, but the labels can be quite wrong.
Are you using the technology to basically, are you helping people log their nutrition consumption, where they're basically taking pictures of every meal and that's turning into a daily calorie count as well as other grams of whether it's protein, carbs? Talk about the data that you're trying to provide and then what input people are putting on top of that.
Yeah. So we might have picked a bad name because everybody assumes we only do calories, but it turned we actually do all micronutrients, all macronutrients, everything. So the goal for us is you snap a photo of everything you're eating, and basically you get a breakdown of the entire consumption that you had over the course of a week. And so we have 200 micronutrients that we track. We track macros, we track everything. So we're transitioning now to breaking it down into fruits and vegetables as well. So we can tell people kind of a fruit score and a vegetable score. These are the things that really matter, right? It's less about calorie tracking and it's more about getting the right foods and emphasizing what people should be eating. So yeah, we cover everything.
Now, as you take a look at SnapCalorie, you could go a couple different routes. You could say, hey, I'm going to go create a consumer brand. I'm going to go spend money and I'm going to be your, nutritional database of record. And I'm going to pull that into everything else I do. Or you could potentially say, I'm going to go and private label Powered by SnapCalorie and go out to every nutritionist and have them use it as a technology. Go out to every restaurant, go out to Precision Nutrition, you name the company that's certifying people. Coming from Google, obviously Google started as like Powered by Google under Yahoo. And thankfully they had that Powered by Google, or else nobody knew who the fuck they were and probably wouldn't be who they are. So how do you think about holding on to that? And how do you think about the pros and cons of that business model when maybe you guys are ahead of the curve and, maybe the smartest guys in AI in this category, but eventually, people catch up? That's an open-ended question. So snap away at that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a great question. I mean, honestly, like I said, I came from an engineering background and I got into this because I genuinely just wanted to help people. And so I might not be taking the most business savvy approach here, but personally, I see the most opportunity to help people in the B2C front. So I love to own the user interface, basically be able to help people with the way that they interact with food. There's a lot of subtleties with the way we present information that can have a huge difference and impact on people's lives. And the more I work in this space, the more I'm realizing that accurate tracking is just a small fraction of the puzzle. I mean, being more prescriptive and telling people how they can modify their diet, I think that has a lot more potential. And we're just starting to get into that part of it. So I've started in the B2C space, or our team has started in the B2C space, but we are doing B2B deals as well, the kind of Powered by SnapCalorie approach. We've gotten a lot of inbound interest from a lot of the top players in the space, given, at least for now, we have a little bit of a step ahead. Right. But we're not opposed to that. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there doing really cool things, and we're super excited to partner with people and help make their product offerings even better. But for now, we've been mostly focused on the B2C and trying to get it in front of people. If that makes sense.
So you guys have raised a fair amount of venture capital dollars, for what you're willing to expose or talk about, to the audience here as an entrepreneur. How do you manage, your own patience and understanding that there's a adoption curve to the same time as like, hey guys, like the technology's here. Like, just all I need you to do is try this a couple of times, and it's gonna work. How do you kind of manage, the the post-it note that says we are making progress, although I might not feel like it's affecting enough people quick enough.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's really hard, especially in the B2C space. It's incredibly tough. The user demand for perfection is quite high when you're in the consumer space. And so it's definitely a challenge. But, I think people just kind of get it when they use it. So far, it's kind of just been a matter of just talking to people, talking to users, seeing what works for them, what doesn't, and trying to iterate. And I think people can see that. We answer like support emails in like 30 minutes or less, right? And so we're getting on calls with people, we're talking to people, and I think people who try the app can see that. And we've seen pretty amazing just organic growth because of that. People are telling their friends about it, friends are telling friends, and so our growth rate keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it's been amazing to see how people, they'll be critical of some elements, but at the same time, when we fix it very quickly and we build something that people want, they tell their friends about that. And it's been amazing in that sense.
So, you're going to be sitting on a significant amount of visual data that turns into ingredient level. This is good for you. This is not good for you. I actually know the restaurant that you had this in. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you what over time this is doing to your body. So how do you think about, if we go back again to like the Google, do no evil, at the same time, there might be 5 years from now, SnapCalorie would be like, you know what, this restaurant is not on the SnapCalorie recommended list because there's shit, all this, and I'm trying to keep you away from it. So how do you kind of maybe think about being Switzerland at the same time saying like, I have a moral obligation to tell people like, do not go here?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think probably at the end of the day, part of it is that I don't see it as fully binary, right? I don't think there's any foods that people just absolutely should not eat. It's really just portion, right? And so how often are you eating that food? And so personally, I love indulging in a lot of like pretty crazy foods.
And so have you tried the honeycomb yet?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Love it.
I'm not putting that into SnapCalorie. I don't want to affect them.
That's all right. Yeah. And so, at the end of the day, we don't see it as telling people what they should or shouldn't eat. It's more about kind of emphasizing the things that could benefit their health and trying to focus more on what they should maximize and less on restriction, right? And so for me, I try to optimize my diet a lot. But there's a lot of micronutrients that I'm totally deficient on. I mean, when you track 200 micronutrients, it's really hard to get all of them. And so it's really cool for us to be able to build interfaces that nudge you in the right direction, saying, hey, if you mix this in, you're really going to enhance the diversity of what you're eating. And so I don't really see us saying like, don't eat this one food, but I do think it's important to educate people like, hey, maybe you want to eat that like once a week and maximize some of these other foods that are really healthy, if that makes sense.
When I think about like personal trainers or nutritionists or any life coaches, I could see a lot of people saying, hey, I'll help you out, with your nutrition just based on how I, eat well, or I, do intermittent fasting, or I'm on a keto diet or what have you. Have you seen any pushback from professionals that think that this is a technology that's like somehow like, like copywriters are like concerned like AI is going to write the script? Like, I don't think that can happen. I think the copywriters should be using the AI and then optimizing what they're doing and providing a service to their clients and making themselves better. Do you see like this embracing of technology, or just at some point does the technology feel like the nutritionist is somehow getting, like intermediated, even though that really shouldn't be the case? That they should be able to provide more nutritional services to more people by scaling their business. How do you respond to that, or what's kind of bullshit and what's kind of real?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's this incredible kind of debate that has yet to be had, really, especially with ChatGPT coming out in particular, where there's this balance between accessibility and credibility, right? And so if you're giving people this tool, it's amazing that people who couldn't afford a nutritionist can now ask questions to a chat bot and get an immediate answer. Now, these are people that are having positive health outcomes based on learning things they wouldn't otherwise learn because they couldn't afford a nutritionist otherwise. That's incredible. But at the same time, there's a question of how credible is that model? Sometimes it's wrong, right? So what do we do? Like, where do we strike that balance between credibility and accessibility? And, as an AI practitioner, the way I see it is kind of what you hinted at. Like, we should be making the professionals more productive. We shouldn't be replacing those people, right? And so if a nutritionist is answering the same question over and over again, they don't need to answer that same question, right? And so if they can have a tool that helps them answer these frequent questions, and then when it comes to like a more nuanced question that requires a little bit more research, they're freed up to dig in further. That's incredible. I mean, now they're able to help a lot more people. The affordability for these tools comes way down. And, I think that's just like a really cool spot to be in. So I think in an ideal world, the way this plays out is we're building tools that make those professionals more productive. We're not replacing them. In the case of SnapCalorie, we actually did just add a chatbot feature using ChatGPT. You can go in. This is totally free to use part of the app. You can ask a question that you'd normally ask to a nutritionist. It gives these incredible answers. It can meal plan for you. It can do all sorts of wild stuff. And if you feel that question is a sensitive question where you need a higher level of credibility, you can actually click a button that sends that to our registered dietitian. And she's verifying those answers for people that have decided this is a question where I really need another layer, right? And so that's how we're trying to strike that balance. But, that's an open debate right now. It's really unclear how that'll shake out.
The last question I'll have for you here, and I'm sure we'll meet up many more times and riff about this, whether it's on live or whether it's on a podcast. Coming from Google, a lot of products are free. Obviously they got my credit card. I'm adding storage data. I'm adding some other G Suite tools. You started this to change the world. It is starting to happen, and you're seeing traction. At the same time, you're running a business that has venture capital money, and they didn't put it in as a grant. So how do you think about revenue models without telling me the exact model, but just to ingrain into entrepreneurs here that you could go so far, and then at some point, let's put some tolls up, or let's create a revenue model so we can actually continue to do what we're doing, not have to go and raise money and convince somebody else. Which I think sometimes people forget that you want to pay great apps for their service so they can actually continue to do what they're doing and make it better every day. And it's not like they're like a capitalist regime, if you will.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a huge question, right? Like we have a staff of people building the product and they need to get paid somehow, right? And so we do have to charge, even though that, isn't really why I got into this. So right now we're doing a subscription model, right? So for the photo feature, we're doing human verification on all the results to make sure that they're as accurate as possible. And so that's expensive. And so if people want to use the photo-based feature, there's a subscription fee for that. Long term, I don't love that because that's not very accessible for most people. If they want to be able to understand their diet and improve their health, I want them to be able to do that without paying a subscription fee. And so I see us down the road getting into recommending food and being kind of the platform where you go to figure out what you're going to order, right? We want to be more prescriptive. We see a lot of benefits for going into helping people figure out what they should be eating rather than just tracking that retroactively. And so as we get into that space, ideally there's some kind of commission model where you can basically take a percent. People that are a little bit more well off are ordering more expensive food, so we can make a little more money off that by a percentage. And it makes it so that nobody needs to pay any subscription fee to be able to access the learning that helps them eat more healthy, if that makes sense.
That sounds great. Well, please use the term HALO. Welcome to the HALO sector, health, active lifestyle, outdoors. It starts with having the right amount of calories. You've got enough energy to actually enjoy yourself and be the awesome people that you want to be. And we'll have another debate with us. It's called SnapCalorie or Snap Macronutrients. Put everybody's name on the back to spend money on embroidered football jerseys.
Thank you so much for having us, Pete.